Mastering her childhood magical talents, the brilliant prodigy ascended to become the renowned great sage Nora knows. She now actively contributes her vast powers to the rapid development of medicinal magic. However, a furious man abruptly interrupts her peaceful life, accusing her of wielding her enormous magical powers for pure evil. He angrily screams that she went mad with jealousy and brutally murdered the woman he secretly loved. Condemning her as the most evil villainess of all time, he declares he will no longer cover for her repeated misdeeds. He immediately sentences the completely shocked Nora to be executed on the spot. Caught completely off guard by the rapid betrayal, the bewildered sage stares in sheer horror. She suddenly finds herself enveloped in a blinding, volatile flash of magical energy. 800 agonizing years pass with her magically sealed away inside a massive crystal. Trapped in eternal stasis, she loudly wails into the emptiness about being incredibly bored. Having spent 8 centuries just watching the world go by, she admits she would have gone insane without her farsightedness magic. She bitterly notes that wading through her own ongoing execution has become incredibly boring. Over the endless centuries, she helplessly watched the outside world transition into a completely new era. Sadly, the traditional art of magic she loved so deeply was slowly dying out and fading into myth. Gazing down at the bustling modern city below, she longingly rests her chin in her hand. She softly sighs into the void, wishing with all her heart that she could have been there to experience it herself. Deciding to distract herself once again, she activates her powerful farsightedness magic. By connecting her magical power to a distant place of consciousness, she projects her vision seamlessly into the outside world. Observing the lively modern students, she nostalgically admits she always wanted to attend a place called school. She longs to eat sweet ice cream with friends and experience the thrill of falling in love. Watching the cheerful crowds gather around the grand architecture, she painfully notes how everyone is shining with pure happiness. A heavy hint of sorrow creeps into her voice as she whispers that living like that must be fun. She abruptly realizes that both her fading body and the crystalline device holding her are reaching their final limit. Originally created purely for medical and therapeutic purposes, it was never intended to sustain her indefinitely, leaving her with only about 1 year left to live. Just as she contemplates her rapidly approaching demise, a mysterious dark void suddenly appears before her in the mental plane. From the shadowy depths, a desperate, echoing voice cries out that it simply wants to die. Startled by the sudden intrusion into her consciousness, Nora questions the strange phenomenon in sheer confusion. The disembodied voice continues to plead for death, begging for an end to the endless burden. The unseen girl begs the void to simply let her die right there and end it all. Nora urgently spins around, wondering whose voice is crying out in such heart-wrenching agony. Hearing the chilling and absolute plea for death, Nora sharply turns her head in shock. Her eyes widen as she tries to comprehend the incredibly heavy words being spoken directly into her mind. Unsure if she has enough power left to intervene, the great sage realizes she might not even survive the attempt. However, gritting her teeth, she resolves that she simply cannot ignore a cry for help now that she has clearly heard it. Summoning what little remains of her formidable strength, Nora channels a massive, blinding pillar of pure light. The magical beam forcefully erupts with incredible power, completely shattering the crystalline seal holding her captive. Enduring the intense, agonizing pain of separating her consciousness from her physical form, she violently pushes forward. She fiercely vows to track down the owner of the weeping voice, no matter what it takes. As the despairing girl continues to cry about her painful desire to finally die, Nora races toward the connection. The sage shouts into the void that she will help, interpreting the suicidal words as a desperate plea to be saved. In a blinding flash of white light, Nora's spirit projection locates the collapsed girl lying motionless on the floor. She urgently reaches her glowing hand out toward the devastated student to establish a direct mental link. Plunging deep into the broken girl's psyche, Nora finds herself rapidly drifting through a vast, starry abyss. Her ethereal form floats downward through the inky blackness as she seeks the ultimate source of the sorrow. Continuing her rapid descent through the endless mental void, she spots a very faint luminescence far below. The distressed girl is huddled up tightly within a small pool of light amidst the crushing darkness. Gently reaching out to comfort the sobbing student, Nora kindly tells her not to cry so much. She warmly teases that her beautiful eyes will melt completely away if she keeps weeping like that. Startled by the sudden gentle touch in her dark isolation, the tearful schoolgirl looks up in complete confusion. Clutching her messy uniform, she shakily asks the glowing stranger exactly who she is. Smiling warmly at the frightened girl, the ethereal visitor cheerfully points to herself. She casually and proudly reveals that her name is Nora Nose. The girl's eyes widen in absolute, unadulterated disbelief at hearing the legendary historical name. She lets out a shocked gasp, completely stunned by the impossible revelation standing right in front of her. Panicking, the student stammers and asks if she means the infamous figure from 800 years ago. She blurts out Nora's terrifying historical moniker, the incorrigible Villainess. With a playful, carefree demeanor, Nora hums and confirms she is technically still alive with her execution currently in progress. She cheekily winks at the girl, highly amused by how incredibly famous she clearly is in the modern era. Still trembling and with tears streaming down her bruised face, the bewildered girl stares at the bright apparition. She hesitantly stutters out a question, asking what kind of terrifying magic is being used on her right now. Nora explains that she traveled from the outside using her vast magical abilities. Clarifying the strange, starry environment around them, she gently states that this isn't magic, but rather they are currently conversing directly inside the girl's own mind. Lowering her gaze in utter self-pity, the student mutters that a great sage can truly do anything she wants. She bitterly compares herself to the legendary figure, lamenting that she herself is completely useless and cannot do anything right. Completely broken by her unknown worldly struggles, the girl quietly confesses that she simply does not want to live anymore. Sinking further into her absolute despair, she whispers to the ancient spirit that she is just so terribly tired of everything. Refusing to let the young girl give up on life so easily, Nora's expression shifts to one of determined, unwavering confidence. She cheerfully claps her hands together and loudly proposes a radical, world-altering solution to their mutual problems. Grasping the girl's hands warmly and looking deeply into her eyes, the spirit makes an unbelievable request. She politely asks if the student would be willing to lend her physical body to the great sage for exactly 1 year. Nora pitches her grand deal, offering to live out the girl's difficult school life in her place so the exhausted student can finally take a good rest. The completely baffled girl can only stutter in utter confusion at the insane idea of giving up her physical form to a ghost. Left completely speechless by the bizarre and supernatural proposition, the bruised schoolgirl stares blankly ahead. Fresh tears continue to well up in her eyes as she tries to mentally process the sheer absurdity of the ancient spirit's offer. Nora firmly promises to return the body after exactly 1 year in the best possible environment. The bewildered girl internally reels at the insane fact that the living spirit of a historically beautiful evil woman is literally asking to possess her. Sensing the girl's total lack of resistance and deep desire to escape, Nora excitedly declares that they have a sealed deal. Overwhelmed and utterly exhausted by reality, the student silently accepts the bizarre arrangement as her tears finally begin to stop. The two form a glowing magical pact by hooking their pinky fingers together in the mental void. Apathetic to her own fate, the girl quietly agrees, stating that whatever happens is fine because she just desperately wants to sleep. Nora sincerely thanks the fading soul and points out that getting to live a normal school life is a genuinely good deal for her too. Just before the mental connection completely severs, the great sage realizes she never actually asked for the girl's name. Back in the harsh physical world, the schoolgirl's unconscious body lies sprawled face down on a flight of cold marble stairs. Scattered test papers and crumpled documents flutter around her motionless, bruised form as reality sets back in. Waking up inside her newly acquired physical vessel, Nora groans in pain as she peels herself off the hard steps. Rubbing her throbbing head, she amusingly notes to herself that the previous owner fell completely asleep before even introducing her own name. Ignoring the lingering physical pain of the nasty fall, Nora slowly sits up amidst the scattered papers. Two bullies standing at the top of the stairs look down in disgust, suddenly unnerved that their usually pathetic victim is actually laughing. Glaring up at her cruel tormentors, Nora quickly deduces that these specific brats are the direct cause of her new body's intense suffering. Flashing a menacing, unhinged smile, the ancient sage sarcastically remarks that pushing someone down a flight of stairs is quite the rough greeting. Dusting herself off, Nora philosophically notes that while eras may change, cruel human nature remains exactly the same. She boldly lectures the stunned bullies, stating the ancient truth that weak people are always the ones who instinctively gather in pathetic little groups. Delighted by the bullies' terrified reactions to her sudden, drastic shift in personality, Nora chuckles and tauntingly asks what is wrong. Panicking at her creepy new aura, the cowardly girls frantically whisper among themselves, wondering aloud if they should push her down the stairs again. Closing the distance in an absolute instant, Nora aggressively leans into their personal space with a psychotic, terrifying grin. She openly mocks their trembling forms, purring that their abject fear makes them look as cute as helpless small animals. Completely and thoroughly freaked out by the intense intimidation, one of the bullies screams in pure terror. She aggressively demands to know why her normally passive, quiet victim is suddenly spouting such insanely creepy nonsense. The two bullies violently recoil, clutching each other in absolute dread as an overwhelming pressure fills the entire stairwell. Standing tall and imposing at the bottom of the steps, the incorrigible Villainess flexes her legendary magical aura, ready to teach her new classmates a brutal lesson in respect. Laughing maniacally at the intense sensation, she terrifies the cowering bullies by screaming about how much it actually hurts. Thrilled by her newly acquired mortal form, the ancient sage gleefully revels in experiencing physical pain for the first time in 800 years. Pausing her deranged celebration, she casually looks up the empty staircase and notes that her frightened attackers have completely vanished. Examining the scattered papers left behind, she deduces that the girl was pushed while carrying them and casually criticizes the school's terrible security. Her internal monologue is abruptly interrupted when she notices a male student approaching her on the stairs. Struggling to maintain her footing, she realizes her new vessel suffered a painfully twisted neck during the brutal fall. Losing her precarious balance completely, she tumbles backward while wondering if she is about to experience that fascinating pain once again. Before she can violently hit the ground, a glowing magical circle suddenly materializes beneath her back to cushion the fall. A sharply dressed male student casually extends his hand to maintain the spell, asking if she is okay. Hovering securely in midair above the stairs, she calmly observes that her dangerous descent has been safely halted. She looks up to meet the striking, intensely focused gaze of her mysterious savior. Staring back with unbothered curiosity, the great sage silently analyzes the boy who just intervened. Swept up into a sudden princess carry, she politely thanks the unknown boy for his concern but firmly requests to be put down immediately. Staring down at her with wide eyes, the boy breathes out a stunned sigh of utter disbelief. He openly admits his surprise at her strangely articulate speech, questioning if she is genuinely the infamous Cecily Travasta. Hearing the name spoken aloud, the ancient sage finally realizes that her new physical vessel is named Cecily. Confused by her blank reaction to her own name, the boy asks if she severely hit her head during the fall. Ignoring his concern completely, she impatiently demands to be set down so she can retrieve her scattered documents. Reaching down to assist her, the boy picks up one of the fallen papers and realizes it is a history assignment. Still securely carrying the girl in his arms, he effortlessly channels a complex, glowing magic circle behind his back. Cecily watches in absolute awe, genuinely amazed that people in this modern era can casually wield such advanced magic. Baffled by her sheer astonishment, the boy states the obvious and confirms that it is just standard magic. As he carries her down the grand hallway, she internally chuckles at the absolute irony of magic being considered a mere delusion centuries ago. Admiring the academy's beautiful architecture, she finally decides to ask her determined savior exactly where they are going. He carefully sets her down on a bed in the empty school infirmary, noting that the medical teacher hasn't arrived yet. Sitting comfortably on the medical cot, she boldly looks up and demands to know her rescuer's name. Leaning in closely, the boy introduces himself as Ivan and smoothly insists that she remember it from now on. Ivan reels back in comical shock when the girl flatly admits she has absolutely no idea who he is. Mocking his massive ego, she sarcastically asks if he is a royal prince, prompting him to playfully offer the princess a magical blessing. Taking her completely by surprise, Ivan leans intimately close to her injured neck to cast his spell. Feeling her twisted muscles mend, the former sage sincerely praises his impressive mastery over difficult healing magic. As the intense pain magically fades away, Ivan pulls back with a deeply suspicious, calculating gaze. Flashing a bright, innocent smile, Cecily tactfully reminds him that unauthorized student medical treatment must remain their little secret. Narrowing his eyes at her unnervingly composed demeanor, Ivan bluntly asks who is truly hiding inside that body. Feigning total ignorance, she innocently tilts her head and insists she is obviously just Cecily Travasta. He aggressively presses the issue, pointing out that her confident attitude completely contradicts her pathetic reputation as the withered grass lady. Cecily stares back with deadpan amusement as he casually confirms the incredibly depressing nickname. Internally amused by the insult, the great sage decides that this pathetic reputation actually pairs perfectly with her old villainous title. Unconvinced by her smug, silent expression, Ivan correctly deduces that she is hiding a massive secret behind a layer of mimicry. Completely ignoring his sharp accusations, she playfully asks why her peers think she resembles a dead plant. Ivan confidently explains that despite his initial doubts, he distinctly sensed a massive, unnatural shift in her inherent magic. Assuming she is acting out, he bitterly asks if her older sister forced her into playing some kind of elaborate prank. Staring intensely at her glowing strands, he points out that the very magical signature in her hair has been permanently altered. Realizing he won't get a straight answer out of the stubborn girl, Ivan sighs in defeat and tells her to head back to the dorms. Playing the helpless victim, Cecily hilariously claims her memory is just hazy from hitting her head on the stairs. Throwing her hands up with exaggerated enthusiasm, she brightly declares that she is feeling completely fine now. Panicking slightly at the mention of a magic demonstration, she urgently states that she cannot afford to be late for class. Ivan looks at her like she has lost her mind, confirming that she obviously still has to attend her daily magic classes. Recalling that every living human possesses inherent magic, she theorizes that Cecily's terrible reputation stems from a specific magical deficiency. Staring at her own open palm, the great sage finally realizes that her new physical body possesses an embarrassingly low amount of magical power. Feeling confident in her magical prowess but needing to study modern techniques, the protagonist decides to prioritize increasing Cecily's magical powers. She resolves that when she returns the body in a year, Cecily must possess the desire to live again. Unwilling to waste a single day and wanting to die without regrets, she boldly asks the prince to escort her to the classroom. He smoothly takes her hand in response to her confident request. Experiencing such royal treatment for the first time, she listens as the prince bows and mockingly submits to her will. Wondering if this is a modern trend, she admits she doesn't actually mind the gallant gesture. Glancing back at Ivan, she realizes she harbors a rather poor impression of the boy. He coldly questions if she is genuinely a good enough girl to help Cecily. They suddenly arrive at their destination, letting out a surprised gasp as the classroom door opens. The mustache teacher checks if Cecily Travasta is feeling better after hearing about her condition from Ivan. Thanking the prince for his thoughtfulness, she learns he had already contacted the teacher by leaving a message with the delivered prince. Declaring she is doing great, Cecily takes her seat while whispering students wonder if they share the same class. The teacher immediately resumes the lesson, tapping his finger against the glowing chalkboard. The lecture dives into the historical incidents caused by an incorrigible villainess who destroyed the previous civilization 800 years ago. Standing confidently, she suddenly realizes with amusement that this historical lesson is actually about her past self. Back in class, the teacher explains that 800 years ago, Nora ignited the love breakup war out of rage over her broken royal engagement. A student immediately raises her hand to volunteer an answer. The mustache teacher points forward, commanding Helga to provide the historical facts. Helga accurately recites that the villainess used miasma for disastrous human experiments and is currently sealed away alive as punishment. Nodding in deep satisfaction, the teacher praises Helga for delivering a characteristically perfect answer. Standing in the aisle with clenched fists, Cecily glares intensely while the prince watches her unexpected reaction. She aggressively stomps her booted foot down onto the wooden floorboards. Startling the bewildered teacher, she marches up to the podium and boldly asks to borrow his pointer stick. Slamming her hand on the board, she furiously questions if anyone in the room truly understands what miasma actually is. She passionately explains that miasma is merely the natural residue produced by using magical power, as normal and inevitable as breathing. While acknowledging its danger, she clarifies that miasma only becomes a life-threatening toxin when an excessive amount accumulates within the human body. She details how sorcery traps accumulated magical toxins inside the body, leading to the deadly miasma accumulation disease that caused the epidemic 800 years ago. Pointing triumphantly, she declares that Nora wasn't conducting evil human experiments, but rather clinical trials to research the medical applications of magic for treatment. Standing before the classroom, the protagonist boldly faces the mustache teacher while the rest of the class watches in silence. The teacher warns her to keep her opinions to herself until she gains authority, though he admits he personally finds her interpretation interesting. He sternly clarifies that her controversial opinion could easily be prosecuted as a subversion of the state. Crossing her arms confidently, she silently notes to herself that being charged with treason would indeed be a problem. She laments internally that even after 800 years, it is highly doubtful her historical argument will ever be truly heard. Flashing a bright smile, she thanks the teacher for listening without rejecting her and admits she feels much better now. Glancing up toward the ornate chandelier, the prince casually praises her performance and calls it a good speech. He urges her to let him know if she encounters further problems because he doesn't want to miss something interesting, prompting her to dryly thank him for the compliment. Walking back to her seat, she feels excited to finally show off her true talents in magical arts and eagerly asks about the next lesson. She hums softly and cradles her cheek in joyful anticipation of the upcoming subject. A twin-tailed classmate suddenly casts a harsh, piercing glare in her direction. The hostile girl bluntly demands to know if it is actually true that Cecily recently hit her head. Smiling innocently, she asks if the girl is worried about her before casually confirming she was pushed down the stairs. Disgusted, the classmate scolds her for standing on the podium with messy hair and terrible clothes, suggesting she hurry back to the dorm instead of disrupting class. Cecily freezes for a split second, her eyes widening as the harsh critique suddenly registers in her mind. Brushing off the insult, she strikes a cheerful pose with her hands on her cheeks. She brightly exclaims that even if she is a mess, her current state might just be in tatters. Commanding the students to take their seats, the teacher announces that the practical test will be a polarized light response exam. The prince leans over to ask if she is okay, while she stares blankly and repeats the name of the polarized light test in confusion. He explains that the polarization reaction is simply training to manipulate magical powers in order to change the color of light. A diagram illustrates how magic extracts particles from the atmosphere while simultaneously compounding them to alter the magical light's color. He elaborates that the extracted particles must actively change depending on the specific color the caster wishes to express. Detailing the complex magic formula, he notes that color extraction, specification, and light intensity commands must be skillfully combined and manipulated. She remarks that turning each step into theorized technology would allow anyone to use magic powers, to which he agrees it feels much more equal than relying on innate talent. The twin-tailed girl mocks her for taking the exam without magical powers, leaving Cecily to internally realize this is the exact technology she proposed and had rejected long ago. Staring coldly, the girl insults her as a porcelain doll with no point in being there and demands she just go back. Smiling through the hostility, Cecily thanks the girl for her concern and internally wonders if she would share her makeup combination. Trembling with frustration, the classmate declares her hatred and asks what the magicless weakling is even saying. The twin-tailed girl whips her head away in annoyance while Cecily simply blinks in wide-eyed surprise. Focusing inward, Cecily admits she barely feels any magic power in her current body and acknowledges that her rival's harsh observation is completely true. The prince effortlessly manifests a glowing orb of light in his hand, casting a brilliant glow across his confident face. The surrounding students gasp in awe, praising his display as a flashy and impressive illumination. He shoots a playful wink toward her, causing her to stare back with a baffled, deadpan expression. The twin-tailed girl flawlessly changes her glowing orb through 3 colors, prompting Cecily to analyze her refined and strong magic power as being just below the prince's level. After an average student takes a turn, the teacher immediately calls upon Cecily Travasta, and she happily leaps up from her desk. Standing confidently before the prince, she boldly asks if she can borrow his help right away. She verifies with the professor that the test gauges their ability to manipulate magic powers rather than their raw magical capacity, which he confirms. When the prince asks if she intends to use his magic, she confirms it but strictly warns him not to interfere with her test. He smiles and agrees while dropping his formal speech, assuring her he will take care not to unnecessarily interfere. Sweating nervously, the teacher allows the unorthodox method, admitting it is difficult to accurately measure manipulation skill without a sufficient amount of magic power. Closing her eyes to focus her mind, she extends her hand and commands the prince to imagine it. She describes butterflies of light dancing in the dark, shifting through 7 prismatic colors. The spell continues as she envisions the ethereal butterflies resting their wings on everyone's shoulders and arms. A breathtaking swarm of glowing, magical butterflies instantly floods the classroom, fluttering gracefully around the utterly stunned students. The twin-tailed girl honestly calls the sight beautiful, making Cecily smile at her cuteness and decide to push the spell even further. The prince watches in total shock as a glowing butterfly hovers gently above his hand. The magical light suddenly dissipates as Cecily lowers her fist, pouting that she was just about to really get started. The teacher screams out in a panic, desperately declaring that she has done more than enough. Clapping his hands while laughing out loud, the prince praises her amazing manipulation power and jokes about her powers awakening from a head injury. He earnestly states that if she possessed her own magic powers, he would gladly recommend her to the Royal Arcane Research Institute. Confronting the messy-haired girl, twin-tailed Anita questions her authority regarding the Arcane Research Institute. Boasting proudly, Anita claims she is a full-time employee there. Nearby students chatter in disbelief, wondering how the magicless withered grass lady just performed such a feat. They speculate this is why the elite professor addressed her with honorific language. Cecily reflects inwardly, realizing she only had her magic powers drawn out. The professor chuckles in agreement as Ivan confidently tells Cecily the manipulation was entirely her own doing. A shocked student wonders if they could manage with Cecily's limited magic powers once they get used to it. Clenching and unclenching her hand, Cecily feels glad she can still use magic properly. She acknowledges that the magic power source must be supplied from somewhere else. Suddenly, Anita gasps and screams about Cecily's fringe. Panicking slightly, Anita points out that something smells burnt. Grabbing the confused Cecily, an irritated Anita demands the girl come with her for a bit. Sniping at Cecily's messy hair with scissors, Anita dramatically declares she has always hated her. Snipping away on the balcony, Anita rants that Cecily is always moping around. She complains that Cecily lets herself be worked like a slave by her sister. Hearing the continuous chink of scissors, Cecily feels annoyed but wonders if this girl is secretly worried about her. Realizing her problems run deep, Cecily ponders if her older sister is truly as bad as Ivan suggested. With her hair finally even, a smiling Cecily thanks her stylist for making her field of vision wider and more comfortable. Packing away her tools, Anita checks a hand mirror and feels satisfied that everything looks right. Suddenly squeezing Cecily's cheeks, Anita demands to know why she is suddenly getting all chummy with him. Brushing the hair from Cecily's face, Anita tells her to close her eyes and dismisses her own outburst as nothing. As Anita carefully applies makeup to her closed mouth, Cecily realizes this haughty girl must actually be good at taking care of people. Opening her eyes, Cecily asks if she can request one more favor. Noting how much research her stylist has done, Cecily politely asks her to explain the makeup she uses. Met with stunned silence, Cecily awkwardly stammers and asks what she should even call her. Flustered and looking away, the twin-tailed girl insists Cecily can just call her Anita. Two smug girls strike a pose, clearly gossiping about the legendary 800-year-old Villainess. A twin-tailed classmate approaches and asks Cecily to visit her dorm because she forgot her basic cosmetics. Enduring noisy praise for her unusual classroom performance, Cecily reflects that this is her very first time visiting a classmate's room. A smug aristocratic boy leans against the staircase, graciously offering to let her do his homework as a twisted reward. Utterly baffled by the boy's audacity, she flatly questions his identity. She coldly stares him down, declaring that his pathetic request isn't funny in the slightest. Outraged by her disrespect, the boy furiously snaps back at her while bystanders murmur about a potential fight. Feigning dramatic surprise, the girl mocks his expectation that she would happily serve him simply because he is her fiancé. While he stammers about being teased, she logically deduces that as an aristocrat's daughter, Cecily having a fiancé makes perfect sense. She firmly lectures him to fix his slacking habits and honor his parents' investment, offering to tutor him only if he humbly bows his head and asks. Enraged by her scolding and her suggestion to break the engagement, the boy shouts defensively and storms off to get dried grass. The twin-tailed classmate yells in shock, while the protagonist mentally dismisses the boy as useless to Cecily and apologizes for speaking out of turn. The panicked classmate lectures her, insisting that breaking a noble engagement without parental consent is completely unacceptable. Clearing his throat, the prince smoothly intervenes, personally praising the boy for expressing himself so clearly. Dispersing the gawking crowd, he casually questions her about the hierarchical standing of her historically important family compared to the boys. Visualizing the aristocratic pyramid, she notes that while the boys' family are newly emerging barons with money, the Travastas rank higher as marquises. Realizing the engagement is merely a financial ploy to support the historically rich but financially poor Travastas, she pragmatically withdraws her annulment threat. Putting the breakup on hold, she ruthlessly informs him that she will be searching for a better financial prospect in the meantime. Dismissing him with a cheerful farewell, she strictly reminds him to go home early and finish his own homework. A furious shout of Cecily's name suddenly echoes through the hallway, interrupting the peace. Pausing her confident stride, she hums in question as she turns toward the sudden noise. The prince approaches with a sly smile, teasing her for openly declaring to her fiancé that she is actively seeking a new partner. A memory surfaces of a noble boasting about holding a much higher social position than some lowly aristocrat. Someone explains that the Royal Arcane Research Institute is the highest authority in sorcery, promising to put her on the list of candidates. Smiling brightly, Cecily jokes that she prefers someone who compliments the haircut Anita gave her rather than a ladies' man. Ivan watches silently as Cecily playfully asks a flustered Anita if she wants to link hands. Entering a luxurious lounge, an amazed Cecily realizes it is a higher-ranking room and wonders if Anita is actually a great milady. Maids immediately rush in, swiftly preparing tea and arranging an elegant tiered tray of pastries. Chomping on a treat, Anita notes that noble houses like Cecily's face financial difficulties, which explains why she lacks a maid and looks bedraggled. Anita asks if education isn't even more important for a noble, prompting Cecily to confess her family heavily opposed her attending this school. Staring at her tea, Cecily softly explains that her family is just overprotective. Her expression darkening, Cecily recalls her family insisting there is no need for sorcery since she will eventually get married anyway. Desperately wanting to be a sorceress instead of a bride, Cecily explains her family thought learning basic etiquette at a girls' academy was enough. Sighing heavily, Cecily laments that she hasn't achieved much despite having less than a year left until graduation. Cecily reveals she promised to obediently marry if she couldn't thrive, driving her to enroll in this school with many sorcery classes. Gesturing openly, Anita questions why Cecily insists on becoming a sorceress when history proves there are other professions available. The narrative reflects that while the country's people always had magic, sorcery relied far too much on the wielder's natural talent. Without a prodigious magician, the common people could do nothing but accept famine and disaster as the land rotted. Anita explains that the Royal Arcane Research Institute treats magic as an academic discipline, allowing power to be used even without being a genius. Pausing thoughtfully, Anita muses that anyone who witnessed their sorcery would undoubtedly admire them. Understanding Cecily's motives, Anita concludes she simply wants a job where she can save people in need. Anita points out that Cecily studied hard and stayed behind after school to train, but asks why he called out to her. Shocked, Anita wonders if Cecily took a special crash course since she didn't have any magic powers until now. Anita coldly reminds Cecily that the Institute already has the very best talent in Ivan, making it a high hurdle for anyone else in their year. Feeling the tension, Cecily awkwardly scratches her newly cut hair. Anita simply stares at her in profound silence, her expression hardening. Understanding Cecily is at her wit's end, Anita figures Cecily must think she is pathetic for believing there is no other way. Breaking the tense silence, Anita harshly accuses Cecily of grasping at straws by relying on a withered grass like her. Sweat dropping as she tries to lighten the mood, Cecily begins to interject. Anita brutally cuts her off, stating that since he never called out to her despite her hard work, that silence is an answer enough. Gripping a dress tightly, an agitated voice demands to know exactly what is going on. Gritting her teeth as tears well in her eyes, an intensely frustrated Anita screams that she has always worked incredibly hard all by herself. She angrily demands to know how someone who couldn't even use basic sorcery properly until just now could possess the audacity to say such a thing. As loose papers scatter dramatically through the tense air, Cecily calmly points out that Anita's immense struggles stem entirely from the fact that she was trying to shoulder everything all by herself. Flashing a remarkably bright and welcoming smile, Cecily excitedly suggests that they should simply practice their complex sorcery together from now on. Settling comfortably into her seat, Cecily happily explains that even she was finally able to succeed at magic only by leaning on someone else and directly borrowing Ivan's powers. Completely caught off guard by the genuine, unprecedented offer of camaraderie, a heavily blushing Anita stammers out a quiet question, asking if Cecily really means for them to practice together. Smiling softly, Cecily acknowledges that Anita helped her without any ulterior motives regarding Ivan, declaring firmly that there is no reason to ever mock a true friend's dream. Stunned by this profound kindness after saying so many awful things, a vulnerable Anita tentatively asks if Cecily is truly not making fun of her. Utterly overwhelmed by the casual use of the word friend, Anita's face flushes a deep, vibrant red as steam practically poofs from her ears in sheer, unadulterated embarrassment. A profound, sparkling silence settles over the elegant room as the heavy weight of this new, entirely unexpected friendship begins to properly sink in for both girls. Stepping back slightly in sudden hesitation, Cecily realizes she might have messed up her delicate phrasing and internally panics that she might have just made the highly volatile girl even angrier. Bursting with frantic, flustered energy, a bright red Anita furiously thrusts a highly decorated box towards Cecily and loudly declares she is giving her absolutely all of its valuable contents. Desperately trying to mask her crushing embarrassment, Anita aggressively insists the extravagant gift is mere hush money, while a highly confused Cecily protests that she doesn't need any sort of bribe. Pushing the expensive items forcefully into Cecily's reluctant hands, Anita admits she is terrified of what Cecily might reveal to others about her highly uncharacteristic outburst. Reassuring her nervous new companion, Cecily gently promises that she would never tell anyone her secret, even without the bribe. Lighting up with immense relief, Anita eagerly insists Cecily use the exclusive developmental makeup samples originating directly from the prestigious Helga family business. Proudly showing off the high-quality products, Anita excitedly points out just how genuinely amazing her noble family's exclusive cosmetic line truly is. Breathing a massive, deeply felt sigh of relief, Cecily inwardly notes that this sudden, highly generous turn of events is undoubtedly the absolute biggest surprise she has experienced all day. Staring critically at Cecily's face with a newfound, fiercely serious intensity, Anita harshly declares that her makeup is completely messed up and immediately vows to fix it. Radiating a bright, overwhelming confidence, the twin-tailed noble promises to properly teach Cecily how to apply the incredibly expensive cosmetics. Smiling warmly at the surprisingly kind offer, Cecily mentions she will be entirely free after school and proposes a mutually beneficial, long-term arrangement. She suggests that, in exchange for the expert makeup lessons, she will happily join Anita in her daily, rigorous sorcery training starting tomorrow. Early the very next morning, a deeply groggy Cecily is forcefully awoken with the shocking revelation that her intense beauty training starts immediately with a rigorous face-washing routine. Taking absolute charge of her sleepy pupil, an enthusiastic Anita commands Cecily to learn these essential basics perfectly before even thinking about going home. Skillfully applying high-end cosmetics to Cecily's face, Anita gently urges the sluggish girl to wake up and recognize her own vast, untapped potential. With a surprisingly soft, highly encouraging tone, she reminds the sleepy aristocrat that there are now truly caring people around who are more than willing to help her succeed. Outside a grand, sprawling aristocratic mansion, incredibly sharp, rhythmic clicks echo loudly as an extremely impatient person aggressively descends the wide stone steps. The rhythmic, highly agitated pacing of elegant, ribbon-tied heeled boots continues without pause, perfectly highlighting the intense, restless energy of the person waiting outside the manor. Pausing her furious pacing for a brief moment, a girl sporting incredibly elaborate braided drill twintails glares out into the empty distance and sharply mutters that someone is running terribly late. Her mounting frustration rapidly boiling over into a genuinely terrifying, dark aura, the glaring girl obsessively repeats that the specific person she is waiting for is unforgivably late. Seething with unchecked, highly volatile aristocratic rage, she furiously demands to know who this disrespectful girl thinks she is to make someone of her status wait for such an absurd amount of time. The furious noble violently screams Cecily's name into the quiet air, setting a highly grim and threatening tone for the newly possessed low-class lady's upcoming trials. In a quiet, beautifully sunlit bedroom from a different time, the gentle, metallic clink of a door handle signals someone cautiously entering the peaceful space. Carefully setting down a steaming hot cup of tea, a highly subservient younger sister cheerfully wishes her deeply sleeping older sibling a good morning. Mumbling softly from beneath the heavy, luxurious blankets, the terribly spoiled older sister groggily begs for just 10 more minutes of precious sleep. Flinching completely awake as she sharply registers the specific, robust aroma, the younger girl stares in mild confusion and immediately questions if the tea provided is Darjeeling. Looking out the bright, airy window with a highly dramatic, put-upon sigh, The spoiled older sister casually complains that she specifically wanted to drink sweet apple tea this morning. Immediately cowed by the petty complaint, the deeply anxious younger sibling nervously stammers out a frantic, subservient apology. Methodically brushing the older girl's incredibly long, silky hair, the younger sister internally reflects that getting her highly demanding sibling ready for the day is her absolute primary job. She diligently lists her exhausting, endless daily chores, which heavily include checking complex homework and expertly preparing all the elaborate meals for the household. With an air of absolute, unquestionable superiority, the arrogant older sister haughtily reminds the younger girl that she is only allowed to attend the prestigious magic school because of her overwhelming influence. She cruelly emphasizes that this immense favor is granted entirely despite the younger sibling's complete, pathetic lack of innate magic powers. Staring blankly ahead with entirely dead, profoundly exhausted eyes, the broken younger sister forces a hollow smile and mechanically claims she is incredibly happy. Deep within her utterly shattered spirit, she robotically thanks her highly oppressive older sister, Nelia, for the supposed twisted kindness. Jolting abruptly from the deeply traumatic nightmare, a highly panicked Cecily frantically wonders what time it is, deathly afraid she is late to serve her demanding older sister. Blinking rapidly in the sudden, disorienting light, she slowly realizes it was only a terrible dream, though the lingering, heavy dread of Nelia remains strong. Driven by deeply ingrained, highly toxic anxiety, Cecily desperately throws off her covers, utterly convinced she absolutely has to get up and rush to her menial duties as quickly as possible. Suddenly registering a soft, unexpectedly damp sensation pressing against her cheek, a highly confused and disoriented Cecily blinks her eyes open in total surprise. Deeply shocked to see a strange, ethereal woman leaning directly over her bed, Cecily screams in pure, unadulterated alarm and demands to know who has broken into her room. Visibly relieved to see her host finally conscious, the mysterious, ancient girl warmly asks Cecily exactly how she is feeling after suddenly passing out. A rapid, highly chaotic sequence of recent memories floods Cecily's overloaded mind, recalling being spectacularly helped by Ivan and successfully chasing away the vicious school bullies. She vividly remembers the bizarre, deferred makeup engagement with Anita, trying desperately to piece together exactly how she ended up in this incredibly strange, impossible situation. Staring wide-eyed in absolute terror at the woman gently dabbing her face, a violently trembling Cecily hesitantly attempts to respectfully address the ghostly figure. Finally recognizing the legendary, overwhelmingly powerful aura, she accidentally blurts out the terrifying, historical title of the nonpareil Villainess. Gently reassuring the incredibly frightened young girl, the ancient Villainess promises to carefully and thoroughly explain everything that transpired during the highly chaotic events of yesterday. With a heavy, dramatic thunk of finality, she casually drops the earth-shattering revelation that it has only been half a day since she fully, spiritually possessed Cecily's physical body. Radiating an unervingly cheerful and highly dominant energy, the legendary Villainess brightly declares she is incredibly glad Cecily is awake because they have a massive amount of crucial things to discuss. Utterly overwhelmed by the sheer, mind-bending absurdity of a legendary ancient spirit possessing her, Cecily groans that she feels terribly faint and promptly collapses to the floor. Struggling immensely to properly process the terrifying reality of her permanently possessed state, a deeply exhausted Cecily weakly echoes the word, talk, as she tries desperately to maintain her fading grip on consciousness. Piecing together the highly fragmented, painful memories buried deeply within the body, the incredibly sharp-eyed Villainess realizes that the vicious bullies were actually Nelia's close, personal friends. Pausing as a truly dark, twisted realization fully dawns on her, the ancient spirit murmurs an understanding regarding the true, sinister source of Cecily's endless suffering. Leaning in incredibly close with an intense, highly probing gaze, the legendary Villainess seriously and pointedly questions if Cecily genuinely wanted to die simply because she was being casually bullied at school. Scoffing loudly at the utterly pathetic reasoning, the ancient spirit waves off the escalating bullying as an incredibly childish and entirely weak excuse to permanently give up on life. Cecily weakly counters, explaining her deeply tragic suspicion that the cruel students were purposefully tormenting her just to rapidly score valuable social points with her beloved, highly manipulative sister. Casting her heavy gaze entirely downward in profound, deeply ingrained sorrow, Cecily formally introduces the absolute core of her despair by revealing that she has a highly dominant older twin sister. Studying the severely broken girl's face with centuries of hard-earned, brutal wisdom, the ancient villainess cuts straight through the excuses to the heart of the matter and bluntly asks if Cecily still truly wishes to die. Trapped deeply in the dark, suffocating void of her own oppressed mind, the fragile host clutches her own arm incredibly tightly, visibly trembling as she attempts to process the sheer, life-altering gravity of the ancient spirit's direct question. Taking a slow, incredibly deep breath to steadily calm her wildly racing heart, Cecily bravely admits that while she has finally calmed down a little, she is still incredibly, deeply terrified of the looming future. Offering a highly solid, remarkably pragmatic solution to her host's intense panic, the villainess proposes that they simply work together to gently get Cecily used to this chaotic new reality bit by cautious bit. Readily accepting the highly daunting but entirely necessary magical alliance, Cecily firmly agrees just as a sudden, massive whoosh of ethereal energy echoes intensely through their newly shared consciousness. With a final, incredibly sharp hiss of swirling, potent ethereal energy, the incredibly deep spiritual connection between the legendary ancient villainess and the highly timid modern aristocrat is fully, irrevocably sealed. The confident blonde girl announces she will take over Cecily's school life as a rehabilitation plan. She instructs Cecily to stay awake and observe everything. Promising to return control of the body whenever Cecily wants, she outlines a plan to study, make friends, and prevent any future bullying. Trapped within her own consciousness, Cecily nervously admits she would hate to miss out on learning sorcery. Clasping her hands together, Cecily explains that studying remains her only true enjoyment despite having no magic powers. The girl inside Cecily's body enthusiastically peels off a bandage from her arm. She cheerfully agrees with the plan and declares they should hurry to school together. Shocked, Cecily asks if she is experimenting on her body, but the girl calmly explains it is merely a clinical trial to see which lotion agrees with her skin. Jogging through the courtyard, the girl mentions Anita cut her fringe because miasma ruined it. She happily assures a panicking Cecily that hair grows out fast anyway. Approaching a large building, she excitedly asks if it is the cafeteria. Nearby students whisper in astonishment about Lady Helga's actions. Surprised gasps and confused murmurs ripple through the observing crowd. A fierce girl with twin tails suddenly appears, furiously screaming at Cecily for failing to bring her supper and breakfast. The angry girl demands gratitude, claiming she allowed Cecily to enroll in school just to take care of her. Completely bewildered, the girl inside Cecily wonders who this obnoxious kid is. Blindsided by the aggressive scolding, she defensively blurts out that she is not a maid. The twin-tailed girl continues her tirade about being grateful to Papa, prompting a realization. The girl inhabiting the body realizes this tyrant is actually Cecily's twin sister. Violently yanking Cecily's hair, the sister demands she hide her gloomy face immediately. She refuses to let someone with an identical face exude such a depressing aura. Annoyed by the abuse, the girl in Cecily's body openly questions why she has to force a smile for her older sister. She claps back, arguing that since school fees apply to both of them, it makes no sense for only her to be grateful. She sarcastically questions if her sister is truly filial enough to demand gratitude. Nelia furiously erupts, screaming that she is completely unlike her useless sibling. She arrogantly declares that merely existing as a cute daughter in this world is its own form of filial piety. Ordering her sister to stay humble due to her lack of magic, Nelia fidgets in annoyance. Secretly, the girl controlling Cecily admits she actually does not hate this type of bratty kid. A sudden tension fills the air as an unexpected presence approaches the girls. A smug boy named Ivan arrives, insulting Cecily as a disgrace to the Travasta family for lacking magic powers. He coldly threatens to send her straight back to the barn next holiday if she complains to their father. Instead of cowering, the girl simply snickers and mocks Nelia, wondering aloud why the supposed daddy's girl isn't actually cute. Humiliated, Nelia violently slams her ruler down, demanding the girl not laugh without permission. The sudden outburst leaves everyone shocked at Ivan's arrival. Ivan smoothly remarks that the Travasta troublemakers are getting along well again today. He asks if Nelia is alright, though his presence clearly startles the group. Smirking down at the girls, Ivan casually tells Lady Nelia that her reaction is a little too much. Nelia completely loses her temper, screaming that someone from a mere earl's house has no right to defy her. Trembling with a mix of anger and embarrassment, Nelia stammers out that she is actually Cecily's friend. Ivan arrogantly assumes Nelia is protecting Cecily because of a love confession he received yesterday. Hearing his ridiculous logic, Nelia growls in pure frustration. Watching the chaotic scene unfold, Cecily remains entirely speechless. Meanwhile, the girl piloting her body steps forward with a confident smirk. Unfazed by his arrogance, the girl blatantly questions what love Ivan is even talking about. Cutting off his stammering, she casually explains there are plenty of other male students to choose from. She brutally rejects him by stating she'd prefer a guy with beautiful magic instead. Dismissing Ivan completely, she turns her attention back to a bewildered Nelia. She smoothly invites the self-proclaimed president of her fan club to share a meal with her. Overwhelmed and groaning in frustration, Nelia looks like she is about to explode from the sheer audacity. Complaining that she still hasn't eaten, Nelia begrudgingly agrees that getting food is best. She officially offers to treat her annoying sister at the school co-op. Walking away together, the girl whispers that Ivan got exactly what he deserved. Nelia follows closely, still visibly annoyed by the entire confrontation. Inside the bustling school co-op, they marvel at the incredible spread of sweet pastries and cakes. Nelia haughtily reminds her that they have definitely been to this amazing place before. The girl cheerfully accepts the free meal, pointing out that she barely gets any allowance anyway. She playfully adds that her missing breakfast was mostly her older sister's fault to begin with. Later, in a classroom, the girls sit through a complex advanced theory lecture until the bell finally rings. The girl immediately turns and asks Ivan if she can buy something. Ivan reluctantly hands over a wrapped package as requested. Nelia glares suspiciously at the exchange from her desk. Ignoring the textbook's charts on attribute repulsion, the girl decides practical application is better. She confidently states that it is much more efficient to grasp compatibility by feel. Pointing to her textbook, she tries to explain to Nelia that even magic powers have their own unique compatibility. Favoring logic, Nelia asks her to speak in numerical terms like attribute values instead of vague concepts. The girl awkwardly admits that her intuitive theory was proposed a very long time ago. Rummaging enthusiastically through her bag, she decides a practical demonstration is necessary. She grins at Nelia and announces they should just use a trick to make it easier. She confesses that explaining things in words is difficult for her super-intuitive type. Furthermore, she notes that the nature of magic seems to have slightly changed over the past 800 years. With a dramatic flourish, she prepares to reveal the mysterious item she procured. She presents a small puppet doll, revealing it is the very item she forced Ivan to buy for her that morning. Nelia stares at the strange toy in absolute confusion. Channeling her magic with a gentle glowing touch, the puppet doll instantly springs to life. The enchanted toy begins happily bouncing and hopping all around Nelia's face. Nelia watches the doll in utter amazement, completely captivated by the spell. She is genuinely impressed that Cecily can manage such a flawless technique with her limited amount of magic power. The girl explains it is all about technique, relying on the repeated combination and decomposition of power. By using repulsion between her magic and the doll's magic stone, she can control it entirely by feel. She proudly suggests that maybe it is better to train using a mixture of both feel and theory. However, an annoyed Nelia interrupts to complain that Ivan is somehow still not here yet. Completely fed up with the distractions, Nelia fiercely glares around the room. She angrily demands that anyone not seriously interested in studying should just leave immediately. Gripping the styling tools tightly, Nelia haughtily crimps her hair and declares that as the older sister, she bears the absolute responsibility to watch over her sibling. Trapped within the body, the ancient soul silently pleads for the aggressive styling to stop before her hair is ruined. A frantic classmate suddenly interrupts, furiously accusing Cecily of attempting to steal her beloved Ivan-sama. The girl inside Cecily mentally sighs in exhaustion, noting that Ivan's nuisance behavior isn't her fault, especially since she explicitly never invited him to their study group. Flashing a terrifying, wide-eyed glare that halts the conversation, Nelia demands to know if Cecily properly delivered the specific item she had entrusted to her for Ivan-sama. The sheer intensity of Nelia's panicked interrogation forces the girls to freeze and beg her to wait a minute. Sweating nervously under the intense scrutiny, the girl cautiously confirms that she did indeed give the item to him exactly as instructed. However, she internally resolves to explicitly ask what exactly that mysterious object was later, just to be perfectly clear about what she delivered. The narrative seamlessly initiates a flashback, transitioning the scene back to the events that occurred earlier during the recess period. During recess, Nelia forcefully flicks a sealed love letter toward her sister, arrogantly declaring that she is generously giving a useless person like Cecily the precious job of delivering it. Bursting with haughty laughter, Nelia dramatically reveals she spent all her class time pouring her love for Ivan-sama into the letter, while onlookers whisper about her questionable mental stability. Disgusted by the thought of Cecily's bare hands ruining the pristine parchment, Nelia explicitly orders her not to touch it directly. Demonstrating her extreme fastidiousness, Nelia dramatically flourishes a heavily patterned, floral cloth with a sharp snap. She stubbornly insists on giving Cecily her own personal handkerchief to carry the letter safely and ensure it remains immaculate. Tossing the luxurious cloth over, Nelia strictly commands Cecily to wrap the letter up properly when handing it over to the esteemed noble. Furthermore, she arrogantly demands that Cecily treat this graciously lent handkerchief as her lifelong treasure. Approaching the stoic Ivan at his desk, the girl inside Cecily dutifully presents the carefully wrapped package exactly as her sister had instructed. Without a single moment of hesitation, Ivan coldly conjures a burst of intense magical flame right in his palm. The sudden arcane fire instantly incinerates the handkerchief and the love letter right in front of her face. Flashing a charming yet viciously cruel smile, Ivan smoothly explains his incredibly destructive and disrespectful actions. He maliciously states that he absolutely refuses to touch any filth that Lady Cecily herself wouldn't even personally hold. Completely unfazed by his dramatic rejection and the fiery display of hostility, the girl inside Cecily merely flashes a massive, cheerful grin. She happily accepts his twisted reasoning, utterly unbothered by her sister's ruined confession. Snapping back to the present reality, she nonchalantly summarizes the brutal rejection for her sister. She casually twists the knife by adding that Ivan even bought her ice cream afterward as a sweet apology for the incident. Ignoring the pleasant outcome of the ice cream entirely, Nelia completely loses her mind in sheer horror. She screams in panic, obsessing over the fact that Cecily almost got horribly burned by the sudden magical flames. Nelia breaks down into dramatic, weeping sobs, utterly devastated as she wonders why Ivan-sama is actively avoiding her this much. Observing the pathetic meltdown, the girl internally notes that surely no one would ever harbor romantic feelings for a woman who so openly bullies her younger sister. Whipping out an eyelash curler with unhinged fury, Nelia viciously screams that Cecily's lack of magic powers is the absolute root of all these problems. She cruelly reminds her sister that she is only still alive right now because Nelia finds her marginally useful. Mid-tirade, Nelia accidentally clamps the curler too hard and yelps in sharp pain, suddenly freezing as a heavy shadow falls over them. She gasps in utter shock as Ivan unexpectedly appears right beside their desk, his expression dark and completely serious. Reaching out a heavily scarred and glowing hand toward the terrified girls, a deeply menacing aura fills the surrounding space. Stammering in absolute fear at the intense magical pressure, the girl nervously asks if her older sister is all right. Moving with explosive, unpredictable speed, Ivan forcefully slams his hands against the adjacent desks. He violently corners the girl with a loud bang, entirely ignoring the presence of the weeping Nelia. Wincing in sudden pain as he tightly clenches her arm with overwhelming force, she glares up at him. She angrily demands to know what he thinks he is doing grabbing her all of a sudden. Dropping all of his usual charming pleasantries, Ivan fiercely interrogates her with desperate intensity. He demands to know exactly where she put the dangerous stolen doll. While Ivan furiously repeats his aggressive demand regarding the stolen doll's location, the girl merely stares back in utter, bewildered confusion. She lets out a baffled gasp, completely lost as to what ancient relic he is even talking about. Clattering noisily against the classroom furniture in her shock, Nelia frantically shouts at Ivan. She demands an immediate explanation for his sudden, aggressive outburst toward her sister. Ignoring Nelia entirely, Ivan clicks his tongue in sheer annoyance and snaps his fingers to channel his mana. He coldly declares that they need to change places to continue this sensitive interrogation in private. As intense magical energy begins to rapidly distort the classroom environment, Nelia desperately reaches out her hand. She screams for them to wait, terrified by the overwhelming surge of arcane power. A blinding flash of arcane energy erupts as Ivan perfectly executes a high-level teleportation spell. The sophisticated magic instantly whisks them away from the crowded classroom in a disorienting rush of wind. The teleportation spell resolves with a loud pop, dropping Ivan and the girl directly into the center of a secretive, heavily equipped laboratory. They materialize completely surrounded by ominous, faceless, articulated constructs that loom silently in the shadows. Taking in the horrifying sight of the mannequin-like constructs crowding the claustrophobic space, the girl recoils sharply. She lets out a deeply disgusted gasp, deeply unsettled by the grotesque anatomical details of the mannequins. Scanning the windowless, secure room, she sarcastically compliments Ivan on his nice hobby of bringing creepy dolls to school. Hiding her true combat readiness, she demands to know what this terrifying place actually is while he smoothly blocks the only exit. Without any warning, she aggressively lunges forward with a sudden clatter of movement. Moving with supernatural speed, she firmly pins Ivan down against the laboratory equipment, pressing a sharp implement directly to his throat. Taken completely off guard by her lethal speed and undeniable combat prowess, Ivan curses in panicked frustration. Staring up at his attacker, he suddenly addresses her by her true, ancient identity, screaming out the name Miss Nora. Pinning him firmly in place as he growls in quiet defiance, Nora coldly orders him to confess immediately so that no one gets hurt. She ruthlessly flips the interrogation on its head, demanding to know exactly where he put the dangerous killing doll. Mocking his apparent loss of the precious weapon, Nora warns him not to try and pin the catastrophic blame on her. When pressed for answers, she vehemently denies any knowledge of its whereabouts, huffing proudly that she has absolutely no idea where it went. Refusing to believe her frantic denial given her legendary status, Ivan shouts furiously. He violently demands that she stop playing dumb about a weapon of mass destruction. Narrowing her eyes suspiciously, Nora realizes his pushy behavior was an elaborate setup because he suspected her true identity from the very beginning. She logically points out that no one was even supposed to know about that ancient creation's existence yet, questioning exactly when he managed to steal it. Getting directly into his face, she aggressively asks if he is currently plotting a terrorist attack. She notes how incredibly suspicious it is for a noble to be leaving such an ancient, lethal weapon hidden inside a populated school. Nora glares down at him with utter contempt, refusing to ease the pressure of her blade. She sarcastically addresses him as Mr. Elite of the prestigious National Arcane Research Institute. Shaken deeply by her intimate knowledge of classified state institutions, Ivan falls completely silent for a tense moment. He finally speaks, demanding to know just how much classified information she actually possesses regarding his title and mission. Startling him completely with her casual tone, Nora reveals a terrifying historical truth. She matter-of-factly explains that the horrifying weapon in question was originally manufactured using her own unique magic powers. Ivan points out that ancient technology from 800 years ago is strictly omitted from standard classes, making her vast knowledge undeniably suspicious. Gripping her weapon tighter, Nora challenges him to provide a valid, logical excuse for his reckless actions this time. Diving into the lost history, she explains the project was developed by the king 800 years ago, but was ultimately scrapped because the prince deemed killing weapons highly unethical. Reeling from this first-hand historical account, Ivan realizes with absolute certainty that the girl pinning him down is truly the legendary nonpareil, Nora. Regaining his composure, Ivan frantically clarifies that the doll is merely a replica he was ordered by the state to secretly analyze. Disgusted by the present era, Nora asks why modern ethics have regressed so much, arguing that such dangerous royal property should have been permanently sealed or destroyed. Ivan explains he had safely concealed the replica under a complex barrier while analyzing its core design. He reveals a catastrophic accident occurred when his own magic formula was unexpectedly sucked right into the doll's intricate design, triggering a complete restoration. He notes that there was absolutely no one in the entire school capable of breaking his highly advanced protective barrier. However, the sudden appearance of her bizarre, ancient magic power yesterday changed all the arcane variables completely. Trembling slightly as the terrifying truth fully sets in, Ivan stares up at the ancient, legendary soul currently occupying Cecily's body. He desperately demands to know who she truly is and what dark, underlying purpose brought her back to this era. Before she can answer his frantic questions, a heavy, ominous pattering sound echoes through the laboratory, drawing both of their shocked gazes toward the shadows. A grotesque, articulated hand suddenly grips the edge of the machinery, signaling the horrific arrival of the awakened weapon. The killing doll replica emerges from the gloom with a sickening crunch, its crude form crafted entirely from rudimentary earth, mud, and clay. It shambles forward aggressively, its ancient activation base resonating perfectly with Nora's resurrected magic powers. Panicking at the sight of the advancing construct, Nora sarcastically congratulates Ivan that his missing doll has finally come back to him. Sweating profusely in terror, Ivan screams that this is a complete disaster because the dangerous replica has completely gone rogue. The rogue doll suddenly dashes forward with terrifying, mechanical speed, forcing the two of them to brace for an immediate, lethal impact. Staring wide-eyed at the incoming threat, Nora frantically wonders if the ancient killing machine is specifically aiming to destroy her first. Ivan desperately erects a glowing magic barrier to protect them just as the massive monster strikes. The sheer force of the impact sends shockwaves rippling across the defensive shield. Straining against the immense pressure, Ivan curses in panic as the fiery beast begins to crack his protective barrier. The overwhelming heat threatens to break through at any second. Trapped behind the struggling shield, Nora casually ponders how she should handle this escalating disaster. She silently resolves to blast the creature herself if the situation becomes truly desperate. Glancing back with complete confidence, she smoothly assures Ivan that she absolutely will not let him die. She boldly promises to lead the terrifying monster straight to the ground. A massive roar shakes the hallway as the creature launches another brutal attack against the fading barrier. Reconsidering her plan, Nora decides she will simply stick to acting like a weak, helpless heroine instead. Wondering why her supposed protector isn't more reliable, she considers just leaving the entire fight to him. Grabbing his hand, she commands him to run as they make a sudden, desperate dash to escape. Running frantically for their lives, the terrified golem stomps aggressively right on their heels. In the distance, Nelia excitedly calls out for her beloved Ivan-sama. Bursting onto the chaotic scene with another sealed love letter, Nelia proudly announces she finally found him. The panicked group desperately screams at her to move out of the way before she gets crushed. Completely oblivious to the towering monster behind her, Nelia eagerly holds out her letter and begs him to read it this time. The fiery beast crackles menacingly as it prepares to strike her unprotected back. Realizing the immediate, lethal danger her sister is in, Nora screams in pure panic. She lunges forward with everything she has to push her out of harm's way. Moving with explosive, blurry speed, Nora fiercely tackles Nelia completely out of the beast's destructive path. The desperate dive highlights her underlying desire to protect her difficult sibling. The monster violently smashes into the wall where Nelia just stood, sending deadly shards of glass raining down around them. Shielding her terrified sister, Nora glares up at the towering threat with absolute fury. Suddenly, an armed man bursts through the nearby doors with a weapon, creating a chaotic splash of debris. The girls flinch in terror as the chaotic situation escalates even further. A dark flashback seamlessly begins, revealing a cruel man sneering that young Cecily is a total disgrace to the Travasta family. He harshly states that a useless person without magic shouldn't even be allowed to leave a trace of their existence behind. Weeping silently in the shadows, young Cecily listens as the adults coldly debate her grim fate. Someone nervously stammers that it isn't completely true that the girl has absolutely zero magic. A wealthy nobleman argues that they are already struggling just to produce a proper male heir. He cruelly complains that keeping a family member without magic severely lowers the value of their ancient bloodline. Glaring coldly at the trembling girl, the man states they will balance out her uselessness by marrying her off to a worthy husband in the future. He officially decides to strip her of everything and leave the family succession entirely to Nelia. Continuing their ruthless plotting, one adult casually suggests they should just pretend the magicless girl died of a sudden illness. Another haughty noble wholeheartedly agrees, sneering that they definitely do not need useless parasites lingering in their prestigious house. The cruel voices echo through the memory, insisting that her continued existence would permanently tarnish the family's history. They repeatedly hammer home the toxic belief that useless people shouldn't even leave a trace behind. Snapping back slightly against the verbal abuse, a young Nelia steps protectively in front of her weeping sister. She desperately screams out that Cecily is actually useful. Clutching a stuffed toy tightly with tear-filled eyes, Nelia fiercely doubles down on her desperate defense. She stubbornly insists to the cruel adults that Cecily is incredibly useful specifically to her. The narrative snaps back to the present reality, focusing on Nora's calm realization amidst the falling glass debris. She finally understands the true, deep-rooted foundation of the sisters' complicated bond. In the memory's conclusion, young Nelia boldly demands that if their father doesn't need Cecily, he should just give her to Nelia instead. The small girl fiercely grips her crying twin's hand, refusing to let go. Watching the chaotic battle unfold, Nora realizes this traumatic childhood incident is the true basis for Nelia's overbearing confidence. She understands that Nelia genuinely believes her harsh actions are the only thing keeping her sister alive. Nora deduces that while Nelia initially wanted to save her sister with all her heart, their toxic environment completely warped her perspective over the years. She concludes that the older sister simply forgot her original, pure intentions as she grew up. Shaking her head at the deeply confusing situation, Nora admits she doesn't entirely understand their bizarre dynamic. However, she notes that despite the toxicity, Nelia clearly cannot bring herself to simply abandon her twin. Staring thoughtfully at Cecily's back, Nora remarks that she genuinely thought the younger girl simply hated her older sibling. She realizes their bond is far more resilient and complicated than mere resentment. Flashing a warm, knowing smile amidst the mortal danger, Nora admits she actually finds their twisted sibling relationship incredibly endearing. She decides to step up and truly protect them both. Feeling the ancient mana resonate deep within her soul, Nora happily notes that Cecily's body and her own legendary magic are perfectly compatible. A brilliant, gathering light begins to swirl around her form. Addressing the foolish but adorable girls, the legendary nonpareil Villainess decides to step in fully. She boldly declares that she will bestow her ultimate blessing upon them. Channeling her immense, ancient aura, Nora confidently commands her true magic power to come forth. The air crackles heavily with overwhelming, centuries-old energy. A blinding explosion of sparkling mana erupts from Nora, sending massive shockwaves that force everyone to brace themselves. Ivan gasps in absolute awe as the immense magical pressure completely engulfs the ruined hallway. Smirking confidently as her legendary power fully awakens, Nora declares she is feeling absolutely great. She boldly promises to show the monster exactly what her true magic can really do.